I was working in the film industry in the 1980s. I studied undergrad film at NYU, and I was working for a wonderful film company. It was called Orion Classics. It was part of Orion Pictures, and the Classics division put out independent American films back in the day when an independent film was really an independent film. Like, you'd make an independent film for as little as $100,000. A company came along called Miramax, which probably many of you have heard of, that started paying enormous prices for independent American films, and it just totally changed the shape of the whole American independent film scene. But at the time, what you had were a lot of small companies, and a lot of the studios, like Orion Pictures, United Artists, MGM, had these little boutique divisions that focused on these small films. So when I started there, I was working in the advertising and publicity department. I was the sixth person hired. 3 of the other people were vice presidents. I don't know what something's going on. Allie, are you signaling me? Oh, you're going like that. I don't know. So, so I used to joke that, I was going to climb the corporate step ladder. You basically could go, in any kind of part of our little tiny company, you could take one step and you were at the pinnacle. So I was in advertising and publicity. I took that one step, and then I went over to what was acquisitions and lumped together the acquisitions and the lab work, administrative work. So, one of my jobs was to, if we had a film from Europe, was to get what we call the internegative, which was then what we used to make a print with subtitles, and I made sure the subtitles were right, and that the film looked right, and that the color was right. I also just dealt with the contracts and whatever, and I also got to watch a lot of films for possible acquisition. Someday we might show the film that I went to see, and unfortunately only saw the second half, and loved it, and came back and told my boss, and I was like, another film company, I just found out another film company's trying to see this movie, but I've got an in with the curator, and we can pull it from them and see it if we go right away. And while we're waiting for the projectionist to show up, who's an hour late, the curator's like, it's really such an interesting film. The first half was made 15 years before the second half. And I was like, uh-oh, I only saw the second half. But anyway, that's another story. So I went over to acquisitions, and part of the thing I did was sit and watch a lot of movies. And so The Thin Blue Line was one of those films. Errol Morris was, known to the small people who liked small films. He had made a really kind of almost a cult classic documentary about pet cemeteries, and people loved it. But he couldn't. He made commercials. Just regular like TV commercials, and he also for a while worked as an investigator on Wall Street. So he had this background that was very, very inquisitive and very almost detective-like, and very storytelling. So he had gotten a grant to make a film about a guy in Texas who was referred to as Dr. Death. He was a psychiatrist who Texas prosecutors always called in capital murder cases to examine the defendant and testify as to whether he thought the defendant had a proclivity to kill again.
Oh my God.
Dr. Death always said the defendant would kill again. He, and you'll hear about Dr. Death in the movie. So anyway, while he was researching this to make this film about Dr. Death, he met this prisoner who had been convicted of killing a Dallas police officer. You'll hear all about this. But he got very involved in his story and ended up making The Thin Blue Line about his story. I, went to the movie in the morning in our screening room with my bosses, and we watched the film, and I was very wrapped up by it. And when I left the screening that morning and had lunch with all my other Orion coworkers, I recounted the entire film. And when I went home and saw Joey after my long, hard day at work, I recounted the film again, in the whole case. So I became it had really just sunk in there. And I started I called the producer and started to get kind of involved in this film. So that's all I'm going to say now, because you're going to hear about the story. How many people have seen the film before? Okay, a few. All right. So this was, at the time, 1988, a groundbreaking documentary, in that, documentaries tended to be more black and white or dull color. It was more like investigative, handheld cinema. And Errol Morris, you'll see, uses a lot of different cinematic techniques, and he also has a soundtrack by Philip Glass, which is terrific. So let's bring down the lights and bring up the movie.
Okay, I'm on.
I just want to catch you up on what happened after the film was made. And thank you to those who brought desserts, or in Joey's case, baked cookies this afternoon.
Yeah, Joey.
Take a bow.
So,
Thank you.
so you can imagine when I heard what that recording, that tape recording, that last interview with David Harris, how the movie ends, of course you feel, oh my gosh, Randall Adams should be free, and you see that card at the end that says he was still serving a life sentence. So I went and I called the producer of the film, Mark Lipson, and I said, I have nothing to tell you.
What year is this?
1987. I said, I have nothing to say about Orion's opinion on the film. I said, I just really want to find out what has happened since Errol finished the film. And he said, it has only gotten worse. All of the evidence that Errol Morris, including that recording of David Harris, that had come out during the making of the film, was presented in what's called an evidentiary hearing. It is hard to introduce new evidence after your trial. Appeals are waged and debated on what happened in your original trial. But they were able to get this evidentiary hearing. They wanted to introduce new evidence. The judge who heard the case, and I apologize, I can't remember the exact conflict of interest, but he had a connection to Doug Mulder, the prosecutor, and he had heard all this evidentiary hearing evidence, and there was more of it, including, David Harris says, well, I went to the concession stand, it was around midnight. Well, this is where Errol Morris's detective work. I mean, he got so intrigued by Randall Adams' story. He went back. He got the work schedules, the movie times from the drive-in. There was no way that he could have been at the movie that late. He had really done a lot of this work, and so the judge heard all this evidence. And by the time I had seen this film. That trial was 11 months, 13 months past, and that hearing. And the fact was, what Mark Lipson told me, the producer, was that there is no obligation on the judge to ever issue anything in that hearing. In other words, he could just let that hearing just sit. He never had to respond to it. And so one of the first things that happened when the film started to become public, and people started to see this, and they were asking what was going on, one of the first things to do was he issued a hearing, and it was against Randall Adams getting a new trial. So, Joe, do you want to talk? So anyway, so I'm having this conversation with Mark Lipson, and I am stunned, and I'm thinking to myself, if people knew this, they would certainly respond, and they would try to put pressure on it. Somehow people need to know when they see this movie what is happening, still happening to Randall Adams. Do you want to?
We were both incensed. We were like 24, 25 years old. I think in my world, things like this didn't happen. This was inconceivable. And we knew that with the release of the movie, that there would be an opportunity to bring public focus to the Dallas Justice Department and the Dallas law enforcement. So we set out to contact everybody we could involved in the movie and tell them that we wanted to start a Free Randall Adams campaign. And we got in touch with, I think the movie screened in, was it Dallas?
It was screening in Dallas. That was where it premiered. Wow. Yeah. Well, they did that on purpose. There's a very famous film festival, the Dallas USA Film Festival, and so that was going to be its first screening.
So Paul and I got a poster and some flyers together and sent them to, I don't remember who we sent them to, but we organized a packet so people could actually sign a protest who saw the movie as they were exiting.
So we made a flyer that updated the case, that said what happened after the film. And then we talked about this judge, the evidentiary hearing, how long he's been waiting for a response. And then at the back we said, write to, the head of the Board of Pardons for Texas, the governor of Texas, the judge who was sitting on this, who was hearing the evidentiary evidence, and we said, let Randall. Now we've never had any contact with Randall Adams. We've never reached out to him. We're just doing this. We're just making this thing up. And we said, let Randall know you support him. And we gave his address in prison on this flyer. FedExed it, courtesy of Orion Pictures. Now this isn't for public consumption because Miramax had bought the film. Orion was not releasing it. But Orion was secretly funding the Free Randall Adams campaign.
Wow.
So,
Did they know that?
no. But I'm sure it would have warmed their heart.
The petition was in Texas?
So
You did?
this first
We
flyer,
followed the screenings. We followed the places that the movie was screening.
Yeah.
So we did that with a couple theaters, and then eventually it opened in one of the art theaters in Manhattan. And there we organized as many people as we could to be at as many screenings when people were leaving the theater with things for people to sign
You might have gotten
and
two
info
signatures in
sheets for
Texas.
people. So Randall got a lot of letters. We collected a lot of signatures. And we got a letter a couple weeks in from Randall in our apartment saying, Dear Free Randall Adams campaign, our name was not anywhere on the literature, but our address, but our apartment address.
our
was
home
on it.
address.
Our home address was on it, 98 McDougal Street. And we got a letter. Did we find the letter?
Yeah, I came home, opened up the mailbox, and here's, Free Randall Adams campaign. And I look at the return address, Randall Adams. Oh, no, I didn't. I have it somewhere, but I couldn't find
it's
it.
It's in an unopened packed box
somewhere.
Yeah. And that was pretty incredible to have the first contact with him.
His mother had been at the screening and saw the flyer, had no idea, and sent it to him. So this is before email, everybody was emailing, before whatever, we called everybody we knew all around the country, wherever the film was opening, and said, this is what the story is, this is who this guy is, we want to send you flyers, and we want to send you petitions. You know, we had just drawn up a petition, and so we were just sort of networking all around the country to have people do this. And it was especially exciting in New York because we were there, and we had so many friends. We had shifts. And in fact, Joey was just in New York, a couple months ago?
This was my September.
Yeah, in September he was in
My
New
dad
York.
and I went on a trip with my dad, and we ended up going to, it was the Lincoln Center Cinemas, and we ended up going to a film there. And we got very close to the manager. And this was 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And my dad and I walk in, it's an underground theater, take the escalator down, and there's the manager of the theater who we knew 30 years ago. Yeah, it was pretty amazing.
It was a fun period because we were both working in the film industry, and it was just fun to have be so friendly with the manager. You know, we got a few free movies out of it. Yeah. So here was the thing though that was very interesting. So we became kind of spokespeople about this and organized a lot. We gave some interviews. We tried to reach out to press. I remember we reached out to 60 Minutes, and they were kind of like, well, it sounds like you already have the publicity you need, although they did end up running a story on it. It became a very, very popular media story, and there became a lot of attention around it because he continued to languish in prison and had this, evidentiary hearing, and it makes you think, oh my gosh, like here you've got this confession, all this thing, and you can't get out of jail, right? And so there was a lot of heat on it, and I'm sure. Oh, so Dallas, there was a reporter in Dallas who really started to, really take it apart, really dig into the district attorneys who at the time, Doug Mulder. And it got transferred to another judge. And I think that made a big difference because that judge first of all, had no conflict of interest and also didn't have to try and protect his earlier rulings. He was the one who said he got misty-eyed when Doug Mulder said the thin blue line. And he said, we were reading an interview with him, and he said, I gotten boxes of letters from people all over the country and petitions, and the interviewer, the reporter asked if it influenced him. He said, no, that doesn't influence me at all. But we were like, yes.
A lot of, it's obvious from the film, but also I think that journalists in Dallas who started writing about it a lot also dug in to how really corrupt the whole judicial system is, and all these statistics about how many people, potential innocent people, were on death row and had life sentences, and so there was a lot of needed attention on a really bad system in Dallas.
So we were very passionate about it, of course, and I remember I talked about it a lot and got some really strange reactions. One of my bosses at Orion, who went on to win an Oscar for another film, said, well, if he's not guilty of this crime, I just get the feeling he's guilty of something. And of course, this is what you see is the problem because, they criticize Randall Adams because he shows no remorse. And then the way they interpret everything, this kid was bragging about it, but then he sees he's going to go to get life in prison, so he decides to tell the truth. Everything that they do, this guy, he says he doesn't remember anything after that. He conveniently has this blackout, doesn't remember being stopped by the police, doesn't remember any gunshots. Well, of course he doesn't remember because he wasn't there and it didn't happen. And one of the things that, there were some things people used to ask about. What about the brother? Why did the brother change his story? Why didn't he testify on Randall's behalf? He did testify on Randall's behalf. His brother was a chronic alcoholic, and his brother was basically sleeping it off, on the couch on a Saturday night. And so imagine you're an alcoholic, and imagine you're not an alcoholic, and someone comes and says, where were you and at what time were you doing things 4 weeks ago on a Saturday night? I can't even tell you where I was last night, home, I hope. But anyway, so then, so you can see how these things, you just become, everything then supports whatever the story is that you've decided, and you interpret all the facts to support your story.
So
Can you show the book?
So
Yeah. Oh, I just wanted to say one more thing. So,
So he got, yes, he did get out.
so he finally
Good
got
question.
out. He finally got out.
Did we not say that?
No. Yeah. So this is where Meryl Streep comes in. No, so
good. Been waiting for
finally
that.
got out. There was a lot of excitement about it. We were watching it day by day. The judge dismissed the charges.
No, wait, are we still in 1987? Or
Now we're in 1988, 89, 88, 89. Okay, so the film's been out. It's gotten a lot of press. Now a lot of people are doing stories on it. Every major media outlet are doing stories on it. They're interviewing him. He's getting flack about, they don't want him at the police, at the prison giving so many interviews. But finally this judge throws out the case, and the big thing is the new Dallas prosecutor says they will not retry, because that was the big thing, was the case will be dismissed, but will they retry it? Here's the thing. If he had been exonerated, if his case had been thrown out, if his conviction had been thrown out, he would have been eligible to receive $80,000 for every year that he was incarcerated. He was incarcerated a total of, I think, 13 and a half, 14 years. Because the charges were dismissed, he received nothing. So he came to New York. We had just started shooting She-Devil, and for those of you who heard last time, and so I called Susan, the director, and I said, Randall Adams is gonna be in town. Would you mind if I brought him over by the set? And it was the first day that Meryl Streep and Roseanne Barr were.
So had you guys stayed in touch?
Yeah. So we wrote back and forth, and we met all these interesting people. Like there was a school teacher in Westchester County which is just north of New York City.
While we were doing the Free Randall Adams campaign, a lot of people kind of came out and wanted to form a community around that effort.
Did we I think we put our phone number on the. we were really very trusting people, and and so this guy was just obsessed with Randall, and he flew to Texas to see Randall in prison. He was Randall's age. He had gotten into some jams when he was a teenager, and he just had this feeling like there, but for the grace of God go I. Yeah. Like I could be Randall Adams. Yeah. But then, so Randall gets out, comes to New York. We have a nice time with him. His mom, Mildred, wonderful. And then you start to see all these interesting reactions, like this guy, John Spate, now he's, Randall's coming up to his house, but, as we hear from Randall later, it's like now John is sort of being very paternal and protective and sort of judging what he's doing. And, and so there are all these kind of people are having these strange reactions. There was a producer for a show that was very popular at the time, A Current Affair. And they had done a big interview with him. The producer, this woman, April somebody, she falls in love with Randall. Now she's following Randall around the country as he's talking to people, and you saw all of these different sort of reactions that people were having to him. Anyway, so you want to show the book?
The film was very critically acclaimed, which helped in every way.
Every 10 best list that year.
And when he got out of jail, there was enough news media that continued after the film. He became, like a little bit of a celebrity. And he got a book deal and he wrote Adams versus Texas with some help. And I think there was was there a TV movie?
I think they did a TV movie, but here's another interesting twist. So Randy Schaefer was his lawyer, and Randy Schaefer charged him like anybody else. But when this started to get hot, Randy Schaefer then was like, "I'm going to do this for free," and Randy Schaefer got a lot of notoriety from this. It became a very cause célèbre. Now, for those of you who've ever done any sort of filmmaking, you're making a documentary. You buy the right. You pay someone to have them. That I'm going to interview you, and in the contract, Errol Morris, it says, gets the rights to this life story, to Randall's life story, and he pays him some nominal amount. Errol Morris made no money from this film. So when Randall gets out and he gets an offer for a book deal and he's getting other offers, he discovers that he doesn't own the rights to his story. Now, he then, the way it's characterized in the press, he then now sues Errol Morris, who is really the person who did all of this work, sues Errol Morris for the rights to his life story. Well, Errol Morris doesn't own those rights. Errol Morris did those for the films that all got transferred to Miramax when they bought the film. So all of these interesting complications and things.
Could you hold up
Should
the
I?
book again? And
Yeah.
are Paul and Joey in this book?
Yes.
So Randall, we have a note here from Randall, Joey, and Paul. Sorry it took so long in getting this. My mother and I thank you for all your hard work and for your friendship. Bless you, Randall Dale Adams. That was in 1991. And he gave us a lovely acknowledgement in his acknowledgements. Thanks to Paul Mowry and Joey Silverman for their tireless work to organize and manage the Free Randall Adams campaign, a grassroots effort that burgeoned beyond anyone's predictions. Thanks to the thousands of people who wrote to me and the millions who signed petitions on my behalf. They came from all across the country, but I must single out the people of Columbus, Ohio, my hometown of Grove City, Ohio, and the good and honorable citizens of Dallas, Texas, for demanding ultimate justice.
Amen.
So the epilogue to all this is probably the last time we spoke to Randall. We were living in Brooklyn. He had a new girlfriend. The producer woman, that got strange too. All of those relationships right after he got out of jail were strange. But anyway, her brother was on death row, wrongly convicted. And it was my sense that he was hoping we would start the My Girlfriend's Brother's free campaign, Free My Girlfriend's Brother campaign. And I felt badly for two reasons. One, it kind of felt like we had one campaign in us, maybe not for our lifetime, but for 20 years. And the other part was that I don't think Randall ever really quite understood that, I do think that all those letters and petitions helped, but, having a massively popular, superly famous movie about you is how you have to win in the halls of justice, as David Harris would say. And there were people who said to me, well, you see, the system works. And I'm like, well, except that not everybody gets a movie made from their life, So I don't think, Errol, I don't think that Randall really understood quite the depth and power of what Errol's work did. Randall died, I think it was a heart attack, like 2011 or 12 or something. Yeah, I have no doubt that I'm sure his time was shortened by, he talked about, he had at one point a execution date, and he talked about what he, how he thought he was going to go into that, He came from a working class family. His mom was in Ohio. It definitely took years off her life. Just, she couldn't get down to Texas very easily. David Harris was executed by lethal injection for that second murder that he had committed. Yeah.
I hope I don't ever go to jail. I don't ever plan to go to jail, but if I do, would you be my Free Robin campaign person?
Absolutely. In fact, I want to free you from something. I don't know what.
And the other thing I wanted to say is, this is pretty early days for the exit interview from films, isn't it? That's a fairly recent thing where when you were taking down people's opinions as they were leaving the theater, I don't think that was a very usual thing in 1998 or whatever. You hear about it recently.
What's interesting,
It was
so
early move on the ground.
Yeah,
There you go.
move on.
Yeah.
People credit The Thin Blue Line of people. This film really knocked people out of, and critics talked about, like I say, that it was a documentary that was told more like a narrative, more like a drama. That it had bright colors. They had reenactments, which there's a whole
That was early
ethos
too, right.
about documentaries. And reenactments are considered kind of a sketchy question mark, but Errol Morris, did this. And it was sort of, given credit for popularizing certain reality crime shows. The year after The Thin Blue Line came out and was such a big hit, the show Cops premiered, where they followed cops around and videotaped them and did their stories. Yeah.
Guys, trendsetters from day one.
What was the Supreme Court decision, the 8-1? What was that about?
Yeah, it's very confusing. I'm glad you asked, because so the question was that all of the jurors who were opposed to the death penalty were excluded from the jury. And so this woman who said, the woman who was like, I thought this was going to be a slam dunk, she said, that's not a fair representation. Like, that's your kind of and the Supreme Court. The one person who voted against that was, and I can't believe I'm forgetting his name, the Supreme Court Rehnquist. Chief Rehnquist.
Interesting.
So the decision only really knocked down the death penalty.
Exactly. It knocked down the death penalty, and you can see again how there are all these ways to manipulate the system. Clearly, if with all everything they had learned, if he had gotten a new trial at that point, he might have been exonerated. So they commuted his sentence, which meant he would never get another day in court.
Did Meryl Streep ever meet Randall Adams?
No.
Huh.
And
Well, we talked about, and it's been on the bestseller list recently, the book Just Mercy.
oh yeah.
And it's about all this going on now, today in Mississippi and in Alabama. And it's written by a black lawyer who is representing black people. And they deliberately do these things where, even though they finally get out, they never get any money because
Right.
of just what you're talking about. And what was interesting is it was required reading for every freshman at Berkeley this year.
Oh wow.
Which I thought was pretty amazing. And he came to Berkeley and spoke, and he's an amazing.
He is a very impactful speaker, but the book is very readable, and I think every American should read it. Absolutely should be read.
What's the name of it?
Just mercy.
Let's put it on our book list.
Yeah.
People wrongly convicted, and there's one sheriff who is still sheriff. And he's as crooked as they come. For 25 years, he's been sheriff in this little Mississippi town. And they just convict him and he's willing to
Yeah.
go on that.
Yeah. It's very. It actually is very hard. It's very hard to fight the system, and you like to think that, if you've got the truth on your side, that will help you, and it doesn't. Diana, were you raising your hand? Diana's read the book.
I just wanted to say, I have recommended this book, The Path and the Spin, for the last 2 months. And I guess I'm the only one who's read it. The book is way better than the documentary, goes into more detail
get a little typo.
How they got the name wrong. And also, he included with the book to Paul, a get out of jail free, get out of jail free cards.
So he went on the lecture circuit, and so here it is, Randall Dale Adams with his contact information, and the other is the get out of from Monopoly. It's the get out of jail free card. It was not exactly free. Yeah. So that's our story. Wow.
So it occurs to me that
Good night. Thanks for coming, everybody.
you did a lot of work, but it was for a lot more than just Randall Adams. In other words, you do one of these things, and it just has these ripple effects.
Well,
And-
I'd like to think so, but I don't know.
You can think that, because that's how life works.
Robin, I'm trying to figure out who's going to play these two guys in the movie. The
Okay.
inevitable movie.
You're going to direct, right?
Who's going to direct us? Who's going to direct?
I think we should do a recreation.
It's
We
got to be
should.
the fellow that directed Arrival and who's doing Blade Runner. Dennis, with the friend.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
He's the guy to direct this. And
I think they should play themselves. They
Except
could
we were young.
No, but we
Oh,
could
yeah,
do
we
that.
could do-
Oh, yeah.
You know what?
Reimagining.
I think the jet is too much. I just need a nip and tuck. That's what we should strive for.
No, the nip and tuck, then the jet.